One of 4 debuts on the card. Coming up this weekend, we have Braxton Smith. And listen, I know a couple of things. He likes lifting weights, he likes horror movies, and his nickname's the Beautiful Monster. And he also likes to separate heavyweight souls from their bodies. Matt, Braxton Smith making this debut, and you look at all of the wins that he has, those 5. They go back to last year and early this year. It's crazy to see that. Kind of similar to a Junior Tafa, just really picking things up and getting that opportunity in the UFC. And I have a lot of things to say about the debuting fighter Braxton Smith, but he's taking on a man who's faced John Jones in the past. So we're talking about Parker Porter, and to make the Tafa connection, Porter's last time out against Junior Tafa, he's favored to win that fight. You would have thought, Justin Tafa, you would have thought he was going to win that fight. No, and that's the thing. Parker Porter has Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde versions of his game plans, to where he fights really smart, he tucks his chin, fights behind the jab, works on his takedowns, or he lets it all hang out, especially in the first rounds of his fights, and he can really get clipped in some of these ones.
And that's the really concerning thing about this matchup. For Parker Porter, he is a well-rounded heavyweight, and that's something we've always said. You can't question his skills, which is the exact same thing I just said about Phil Hawes, but for Porter, when he is fighting in that intelligent manner, like you said, tucking the chin, using the clinch in an intelligent manner, getting out, using the boxing combinations, he can have success in the heavyweight division. And we had talked even before we started filming about Braxton Smith. Are the positives there? Yes, they are. He has absurd hand speed. He does have really good power when he is able to land. But the weaknesses also have to be talked about, because he's a guy who is going to load up a lot on his shots. And I vividly remember Mike Goldberg used to talk about this, about how the 2 most different strikers in the UFC, or at least in middleweight, were Wanderlei Silva and Michael Bisping, right? Michael Bisping doesn't load up on anything, right? He's going to kill you with volume. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Whereas for Wanderlei Silva, he's going to sit there, plant, and throw everything into every shot. Braxton Smith is much more on the Wanderlei Silva side of that scale than the Michael Bisping side, I would say.
Smith might be the most interesting prospect to come into the UFC in a really long time, because he had a fight in 2014 when he was very, very young at 24. He fought Chase Sherman in their pro debuts, and he lost by first-round knockout. And then he took 8 years away, and he did an interview with, and you've never heard of it before, All-Star MMA with JHK, and he touched on the fact that he got into MMA because of his mom. His mom used to watch WEC, and she was a giant Uriah Faber fan. She used to watch Strikeforce and a little bit of the UFC, and her favorite fighter was Brock Lesnar, and Braxton Smith was a football guy. He was a running back at 260 pounds. Like, what was Big Lefty's name? Sadly passed away. Big Lefty.
I had no idea.
Somebody out there is just punching their car steering wheel. Listen to me saying this. I'm going to look it up. I can think of him. I can picture him in my mind's eye. But Braxton Smith, a really big guy for football, playing a position you wouldn't assume he'd play. But out of the interview that he did with JHK, he said, I had a vision board of coming into the UFC, and I thought when I got back into it in 2022, it was going to take me 2.5 years to get into the UFC. It took him about a year. So it's wild to see that. But here's the quote that I got out of Braxton Smith that I found insane, and I want us to digest this after I read it. All of those fights I trained myself. You know, I didn't have anybody. So now that I'm in the UFC with this platform, like getting into a real good gym, a home gym where I'm comfortable with, and that's the next step for me, or for us, he said. For those fights that he had over with PFC where he's dusting guys, he didn't even have a home gym. All of a sudden, he's now training out of Ohana Academy HQ in San Antonio for this one. And he said after this fight, he's going to go back to Austin and he's going to find a gym in Austin. I find it crazy that a guy had this much success with the talents that he has naturally, that he didn't even really have a gym and he trained himself. Like, kudos to him. I find that insane. Your thoughts on that?
No, it's extremely impressive. Again, I still worry about the holes in his game being there. Can they be worked on? Yes, they can be. But things like that do take time. And I just don't know if he's had enough time to work on those things just yet. And again, you've watched our channel if you're watching this video. Parker Porter is a heavyweight who's set in his ways. And sometimes being well-rounded is almost a detriment to yourself, right? If you're a jack of all trades, you rarely have one single strength. And that's what I would say about Parker Porter. There's nothing he does that is going to really make you go, wow. Parker Porter is a one of one in that category, but could he go out there and really use his physicality, use the clinch, wear on a guy like Braxton Smith, and not give him the separation he really needs to land those power shots? I think Parker Porter could use a game plan like that to find success, but again, if he is just on the outside trying to paw the jab out there playing that game, this fight could be over in, 17, 18, 19 seconds?
And that's it. Braxton Smith's longest fight was just over the 2-minute mark in the first round, and if you do look at it, I mean, he did another interview with Alex Behunin in Cage Side Press this past summer, and he said after the Sherman fight, he was kind of lost. He wasn't in the right space to fight, so he agreed to play arena football in Vermont, and then he really took time off to get
Impressive.
right. And he also said in that one that he hurt his left hand in the first fight against Shakori Savage. He kind of had to heal that one up on his own and get back into it. But if you look at the fights that Braxton Smith has had, the fight against Beck taps the gloves and then pressures with a big flurry, and he's able to land on Smith. But ultimately, I mean, some really big shots up against the cage, and then you had that southpaw head kick from Braxton Smith that was able to separate Beck from consciousness. The fights against Savage, the first one drops him like he's a tree. The second one, it was a right hand, and then it was like his forearm came up and hit Savage.
It was a clubbing shot.
The forearm hits Savage, same finish. Like a sack of potatoes. It's Bud the Spud from the Bright Red Mud. You look at the other fights against Lopes. The thing that I found interesting in the fight against Adilson Lopes, Smith doesn't check the kick at all.
Lopes didn't look good in that fight, though. He basically stood there with his hands down and walked straight back. I have to say that. He had the best record on Braxton's resume, but if you go back and watch that fight, he was a body in the cage. And the number, it's not even really a comment, but the number one comment on that was Lopes was his Uber driver 5 minutes before. That wasn't a big time matchup, is what I'm saying.
Against Chisholm Brungard, he doesn't check the leg kicks, he doesn't cut the cage, and then all of a sudden he's running in and he doesn't jump, but he just kind of throws like a Superman punch as he runs in, and that's what ends up getting the finish. So Braxton Smith, a lot of power, somewhat unorthodox, and he gets weird extension to where he's on his front foot all the way out.
No, don't even call it weird. It's not great. If you lead with your chin,
awesome.
You're gonna get, not awesome when you fight really good counter-strikers, though, because they're gonna make you pay for that. Anytime you lead with your chin, it's leaving a really big opening there. And maybe some guys on the regional scene aren't gonna make you pay for it. Maybe Parker Porter's not gonna make him pay for it. But this is the heavyweight division. Eventually, if you are good enough, you're gonna fight fighters who have huge power. Tai Tuivasa right now isn't at a great point in his career, but if you strike like that against him, he's going to land a massive shot and put
Porter
you in.
is a decent favorite in this matchup, and if you really do consider it, I mean, Braxton Smith is going to be one of those guys that until there's more tape on him, he's going to get slept on. It's really hard to try and pick a guy like this. So when you're trying to make an overall pick and prediction on the fight, obviously I'm going to go with Parker Porter. But it is a little bit of a tricky one, because if we get the version of Porter that wants to go out there and brawl, then he could be in for a tough night.
Exactly, but he is the more well-rounded heavyweight at the end of the day, and that's why I do favor him in the matchup. Again, could he get knocked out in the opening 20-25 seconds? I definitely think that could happen. I think Porter's going to wear on him a lot, though, with that physicality. I think we're going to see the clinch a lot from Porter.
599 Tapology votes in this one. 77% Smith with, over a 90% clip that I have to win by knockout. The fans have Smith. We have Parker Porter to get the win. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Some big time matchups left on this card. You are not going to want to miss any of it. Keep locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say,
let's get into it.